Hello and welcome to a Tuesday Election Day version of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined today by Osceola recruiting writer and recruiting analyst Nick Carlisle. We were without the man, the myth, the legend, Charles Fishbein today, so we'll try to struggle on without him. But I think Nick actually has most of the news covered from what was a very busy weekend at Florida State. Obviously, Nick, did you vote today?
I voted earlier, so I didn't vote today, but I did vote earlier. So we're all covered there. All covered there. But did you vote today? I don't know. I don't know if you were one of the early risers.
I did vote today.
Okay.
I did. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Ready to see what happens either tonight.
Ready to get it over with.
Tomorrow night. The next night, a month from now, who knows when this election's going to end? But
I don't know.
Much like this Florida State football season, I'm ready for it to be over.
I'm ready for my phone to stop getting spammed with text messages from the Harris Waltz campaign. I tell you, if they spend the amount of money that they did buying phone numbers to pester me multiple times a day, and allocated that somewhere else. We don't need to get into politics. I'm just tired of my phone getting blown up. That's the end all be all point of it.
Yeah, I'm getting them from local races, not national, which is weird to me. Now, I don't ever answer a number that I don't have a contact name for, so I don't bother with that. So, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, big day in America. I'm glad everybody's kind of feeling patriotic. I see a lot of red, white, and blue on Facebook today, and people with their "I voted" stickers, and so it's good. It's going to be exciting night. Exciting, and we got football tonight. Some action, I believe, maybe some Sun Belt action. So a lot going on. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on off the field this weekend, Nick. Florida State. With 4 official visits in town for the North Carolina game. And although it didn't work the way the Seminoles wanted on the field, obviously I read some of your stories. I know that you were able to talk with a number of guys, not only guys that were on official visits, but a couple of commits, a couple of top targets. But let's start with the guys that were on official visits. I know you wrote a story on Florida defensive tackle commit Jeremiah McLeod. Just tell us what Jeremiah said and how you feel about Florida State's chances of flipping him based off what he told you after his visit.
Yeah, it was a good visit in the sense that McLeod got to spend some extended time with not only Coach Norvell, but with Coach Higgins as well. Because that's something that they haven't really been able to do with McLeod with his recruitment. Obviously, he transferred from Lee County to Gadsden County, which is when Florida State first caught wind of him. Now he's back at Lee County, and for whatever reason, even though they offered him in May, they were never really able to get him on campus consistently. I mean, he was supposed to be here for the Boston College game on September 2nd. It's a coin flip on whether he was actually there for that. I mean, I've asked some of our colleagues at some of the other recruiting services. They don't know if he was actually there for that, but he was definitely here this weekend. And Florida State gave him something to think about. They moved up his board, but to be honest with you, Pat, I don't think that this visit really did much for Florida State other than getting him on campus and taking a stab at him and trying to talk to the kid in person, meet his family, see what they think and see what they say. From what I understand, I think Georgia is far and away the leader here. I would not be surprised to see him pull a trigger for the Bulldogs in the next week or so. Florida State certainly has a shot. You have a shot anytime you get them on campus officially, of course. But in terms of what this visit did for Florida State, I think that if anybody is going to flip McLeod away from the Gators, it's going to be the Bulldogs at this point.
Well, I guess there's a couple ways to look at that. I believe it. Obviously, Georgia is one of the best programs in the country and multiple national titles under Kirby, and where Florida State's going as a program is not very doesn't look great to prospects, other than the chance that obviously they're selling that they have a chance to play. And the other thing you look at that is maybe it solidifies a guy like Kevin Wynn in Florida State's class if McLeod were to flip from Florida and go to Georgia. Maybe it solidifies that, because right now, it's vitally important for Mike Norvell to hold on to these commitments that he has for this class. And I said, that could you may not be able to flip him your way, but if he flips another way, that might save you the loss of a guy like Kevin Wynn, who I'd have.
Sorry, I was just going to say there are a lot of defensive tackle dominoes to fall here, because there's McLeod, who, by all intents and purposes, from what I'm hearing, is strongly leaning towards Georgia. Then you have the other Florida defensive tackle commit, Joseph Mbachu, who is tied to USC, Texas, and then of course you have guys like Christian Ingram, who's kind of one of those guys that has come up in recent weeks. And I think he just went to Michigan. Florida State offered him, but ultimately he wasn't. I don't want to say he wasn't interested, but the ship had sailed before they had got there.
Right, yep.
So, and then there also leaves, South Carolina in all of this, which is where Kevin Wynn was this weekend on an unofficial visit. There are a couple of dominoes to fall here. To your point, if one of them goes the way of Georgia, another, let's say Mbachu, goes to Texas, it depends really on how much these elite schools right now want to hoard at one position. Because we'd like to think that everything slots in nice and easy. Okay, you go here, you go here, you go here, but who's to say that Georgia can't take multiple more defensive linemen, right? So there are some dominoes here to play, and obviously it may be beneficial to Florida State in terms of keeping Wynn if McLeod and Mbachu and whoever else is on the board right now, uncommitted or committed, that's looking elsewhere, is taking visits.
Well, and the other part of this is how many of these teams are going to move to 105 and or stay somewhere between 85 and 105, and listen, you can't stock up with enough good defensive and offensive line bodies and see how they develop. Before we move on to the three other official visits, one of McLeod's teammates was in town, as you've mentioned, Osmine Cromah, the running back from Lee County. Do you think he was here simply to come with Jeremiah? Do you think it was here of his own accord and he was just coming to fill things out? I know that he made some positive statements on social media about his visit to Florida State. Did you get a chance to talk to him, and what is your read on that situation?
I didn't. I didn't see him on Saturday, and apparently he was at the Moore Center way before I got there on Sunday morning, so like 8 or 9 a.m. So he was one of the early guys there. Honestly, Pat, and this continues from when he was uncommitted and still considering Auburn, Georgia, and Florida State. Yeah. It's really hard to get a read on him because he had mentioned that he was going to be back for this game before he committed to Georgia on October 5th. He said, I'm going to be back on November 2nd. So it's not a total surprise to see him on campus on Saturday, but it is sort of surprising in the sense that visit stayed the way that it was. Like, normally when you say, I'm going to be back somewhere, and then you commit somewhere else, it's very common for those visits to suddenly disappear and poof into the middle of air, right? So, I think if I had to guess, I think he was fully intending on coming back to Florida State. I think he really, really likes Coach Norvell and Coach Johnson, Coach Yak. I think it just so happened to line up that his teammate was here this weekend, and that definitely probably gave him a little bit of extra motivation to be here this weekend. I don't know because he wasn't really with the rest of the visitors this past week, and so he was kind of slipping in and out. I don't know. I guess in that sense, like how serious this visit was in terms of whether Georgia should be worried about his commitment or all of that. But he's a hard one to read. So honestly, I know that's riding the fence on the answer, but it can really go either way.
Well, listen, he's been hard to read even when we knew it was down to 3 schools. It was hard to figure out. Listen, I think it's great they got him back on campus, like you said, even for a guy like that to get him back after his official visit. And now this is at least the second time. I know he came back in late July and had a great unofficial visit with Florida State then. I don't know if he got back before then, between that July date and this weekend. But you get him on campus. Obviously, I think. It could have been as simple as he wanted to come down and get some clarification on what may or may not happen after the season's over, because those conversations are taking place with high school recruits, with all the fervor around Florida State and the potential changes on staff, both on the field and off, that could take place. So you don't ever know how those could affect a individual recruit's process and decision making. So we'll see there. Of course, you had a couple other committed kids. Tayshawn Gelsey, the wide receiver, tight end from Jacksonville, was here again. Another Florida commit. What has been your read on that? I know we didn't get a chance to talk to him as a staff, but obviously, I saw his parents put out a statement this morning saying that they were very appreciative of Florida State having him on campus. They really enjoyed their time. And I think you mentioned before, his parents grew up Florida State fans. So do you think that will help Florida State's standing with him?
Yeah, I do. And I think also the fact that he was there over the summer for the elite camp helps too. They didn't offer him over the summer. Obviously, that offer came somewhat recently, but I think out of all of the guys that were on campus this weekend, I think if there's anybody that they probably have a better shot at than others, it's probably Gelsey, because there is more of an established relationship there. Obviously, the parents, or I believe it's mostly the father, that is a fan of Florida State, and you were able to get him on campus, which, as we talked about with some of the other people that we've talked about already on the show today, Pat, it's important to get these guys on campus and get in their ear, talk to the family, talk to him, let him know what's going on and what he can do on the field here. So I think they've given him something to think about. I think there is a decision to be made here, and unlike some of the other guys that were officially visiting this weekend, he had been on campus more frequently before. So that gives me a little bit of a more optimistic feeling about him over the others.
Well, and clearly Florida State's got to figure out a way to flip he or the other wide receiver that was on campus, Javon Boggs, who was committed or is committed to UCF. Obviously Florida State does not have a wide receiver committed to this class. Can't survive that way in Mike's offense, where you're playing 6 and 7 receivers a game. So what was your take on Javon Boggs' visit? What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
According to what Rivals analyst John Garcia said, the visit went well. That's about, unfortunately, all I can say on it is that
he felt like comment.
He felt like the visit went well. Yeah, I'm not overly optimistic on Boggs, because you let a kid like that kind of sit in your wheelhouse, and he hadn't been on campus for something ridiculous, like I think over a year and a half. And obviously we're big on getting these guys on campus and having the relationships be there. And I'm just not overly optimistic about trying to get these guys super late and try and quickly forge these relationships so quickly without them having been on campus in such a long time. I can't be optimistic about it, despite what he's told John Garcia about his visit. So it could have gone well. I may 100% be wrong, and he may commit or flip his commitment tomorrow, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah, and listen, I think the one thing that probably helps Florida State in that recruitment is UCF is in its own way struggling this year. They have not been they're not competing for the Big 10, Big 12 championship. They're not even in the discussion. They're in the lower half of that league. Florida State does have a real need for wide receivers, and obviously, as Fish likes to say, they got the money to spend on a wide receiver. Does that play? I still don't think you should overpay. Just because I don't think you overpay a kid because you don't have. I think you do what you're going to do anyway. But as Fish likes to say, they got some money in the bank to spend on those two kids. And listen, they got to get one of them. Now I know they had another. They sent out an offer to according to the kid, Jordan Scott, a 6'7" wide receiver from Southern Miss Junior College or Community College in Mississippi. He did let me know that he did confirm the offer via text about an hour ago, but he has not answered any of my other questions, so I am going to try to get some background information on him. But obviously, 6'7" wide receiver would be in the Johnny Wilson type, so
Yes.
they continue to try to fill that void in this recruiting class. And then, of course, the last guy that was on camp on official visit was a kid that I think is intriguing just because of his story, Toby Hostrup, who you and I have both communicated with, you more recently than I. I think you've talked to him since the end of his official visit. I think he left Monday morning, if I'm not mistaken.
He left Sunday afternoon.
Sunday afternoon. I know one of the kids left on Monday, but what did Toby have to say, and what is your read on that? I know you felt particularly good about him since they offered, and tell us who else was involved.
Yeah, no, so I got to talk to Toby briefly. I'm hoping to talk to him again one-on-one either later tonight or tomorrow to get a little better read about how his visit went. But from the short period that I talked to him, and he had to quickly leave, so I only got about maybe 30 seconds worth of talking to him. But he basically said, "Hey, everything went really smoothly this weekend. I could see myself at Florida State," which kind of, I don't know, backs up what his perception of Florida State was before he got here. Again, kind of the story with Hostrup is, he blew up out of nowhere, and his coaching staff at Maid Creek was pushing Florida State as one of the schools that they felt would fit him. So obviously we're hoping to have more there in the coming days and a little bit more specifics there. But I think early returns are that it's very positive, and I would not be surprised to see Florida State rather among the finalists for his recruitment. He still does have a few more official visits to go. He does have an official visit to Illinois, and I do believe he has one to Virginia as well. So I think that's the next 2 weekends. Oregon did offer yesterday, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see if the Ducks get involved. I don't know if they have any open dates. Obviously, signing day being moved up, there's not that much time left. Like that early signing date is scarily close. So yeah. I do think that Florida State will end up being a finalist in this one. I got to talk to Toby a little bit more to get a little bit of a better reading on, what he thinks and what he saw and what he was looking for, because a lot of this weekend was about making sure that the relationships that he was building over the phone with Norvell, with Papuchis, translated to being in person, which historically that's been one of the things that I think Norvell has excelled at.
Yeah, and I don't know. Now I know he came out and said that he was going to announce on December 2nd with National Signing Day on the early National Signing Day on December 4th. I just wonder when he continues to get offers if he will expand that to February, particularly with everybody will likely, if anybody wants to go over 85 scholarships, they can. So really there is no rush for him if he were to change it. So I just wonder with all these other programs coming in last minute, if he will push that back because the calendar will go dead shortly after National Signing Day. He would have to wait till sometime in January to go back on other official visits. So that could get interesting. His timeline could get interesting, or maybe he'll take midweek visits. I'm sure if his team's not in the playoffs, he could take midweek visits to some of these places prior to December 4th.
Yeah, I think they did end up making the playoffs. I don't know. That's something that I'll ask him when I talk to him. The other couple times that I've spoken to him on the phone for stories that we've done on the Osceola, he has reaffirmed his attention to me that he does want to sign somewhere or have his commitment on December 2nd and then sign on the 4th.
Okay.
Now, but obviously, like to your point, that he's taking all these visits now and he's in the middle of those visits, that he could, sit down with his family and his coaches for the final, let's say, week before his commitment date and just really struggle with the decision and say, I need to put it off. I need to put it off. No, because obviously, even no matter whether you've been a recruit for 3 years or 3 months, it's still a monumental decision and one that, all these kids try to take as seriously as possible. So,
I just want, that could be interesting to see how his timeline plays out if all these big name programs continue to extend new offers and if he's willing to do that. But yeah, I think the shorter timeline, if this timeline is December 2nd, I think right now that works to Florida State's advantage. Anybody else, obviously, he's taking official visits to, which I know are Boston College, Missouri, and you're saying Virginia still left, possibly LSU. I know Texas A&M was trying to get in there at one point. So we'll see what happens there. Now, I thought there was some good news coming out of some of the committed kids. I saw Mario Nash's dad put out a very positive statement about his son's commitment is solid to Florida State. So that's good news. And I know you had an interesting conversation with Tramel Jones. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Tramel, he obviously nobody's really happy with how the season has gone, whether you're commit trying to hold everything together or you're obviously somebody within that building already. But really the conversation with Tramel is that, he's still confident in Mike Norvell as a head coach and, the vision that he has for the program. Because, before Tramel was even committed and before, Norvell really got this thing up and running, he had that vision and he did get Florida State to where they wanted to be, albeit it was for a very short time before this season. So the message really from Tramel was that he's still working hard to recruit on the trail for Florida State, kind of keep this class as intact as possible, go after some other guys. Obviously, he's got relationships, and that's something that we didn't touch on earlier, Pat, is he does have relationships with both Boggs and Gelsey. Obviously, Gelsey goes to Riverside in Jacksonville, so they would have crossed paths multiple times, and they've known each other for years, apparently, and Tramel Jones knows the family, so that's something else that maybe makes you feel a little bit more optimistic about Gelsey specifically. And from what I understand, Boggs and Tramel Jones were on the same 7-on-7 team, SFE. So, Tramel is, for as good as he can with a broken ankle, is trying to get out here and put on his recruiting hat. So he's still recruiting hard for this team. And he's still optimistic about the future of the program, despite kind of the unrest about and uncertainty about, how things are going to progress over the next 4 or 5 months. Was he on a scooter? He was. And I asked him about that. I said, man, you've been on that scooter for a long time, because the injury happened the second week. Yeah, it happened in the first week of September or something along those lines. So he said, Nick, I can walk. I'm just taking it easy, making sure and taking extra precautions because I want to be ready in December when I get here. So
yeah, all right. So he has expected to be able to go through spring next year. That's good.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm glad he's going to get healed that quickly. Another guy I think you've probably got to feel better about is Chase Lofton. He went to Nebraska this weekend, and of course, I'll let you tell the plan forward from there. But after reading what Greg wrote, I really felt better about Florida State's situation there.
Yeah, so I think the big news and the main thing to take away is that Lofton is expected back for the Florida game on November 30th. This visit was not set up a couple of weeks ago, like when he decided to start taking other visits. This is something that he has decided very recently. Obviously, he was at Nebraska this past weekend. Nebraska's in a little bit of a slide themselves. I think they've lost 3 or 4 in a row, something along those lines.
It's not been pretty there either.
Yeah. So, but I mean, we talk all the time about how results aren't the end all be all to some of these kids, especially to a kid like Lofton, who he comes from Omaha, so Lincoln's just down the road.
Yep.
But so he's going to be back on Florida State's campus for a visit. He's expected back on November 30th. He is also expected to take visits to both Texas A&M and Missouri. I believe Missouri probably this upcoming weekend because they host Oklahoma, and I probably guess that he's going to be at the A&M versus New Mexico State game in a couple of weeks. Because if he's
still hopping around a little bit.
Yeah, so he's still hopping around a little bit. Honestly, I would be a little bit worried that if he does not show up for the Florida game on November 30th, which we have no reason to believe that he won't show up right now, he would probably be back at Texas A&M for Texas A&M versus Texas. So that is the better game to be at. So I'm sure that Texas A&M, once they get him there, we're probably.
Yeah, I would worry if he was. I'm with you. I'd worry if he's there, not here on the 30th. That would be my concern. And I will say this: Greg Smith is got a pretty good relationship with Chase. So I mean, right now, if you had to ask me, I'd say I'd be surprised if he didn't end up in Tallahassee on for the Florida game. I would be very surprised.
Right. But I mean, this is huge. This is huge for Florida State to have him set the visit. And essentially, this seems like just another go around of every school that he took an official visit to in the summer, because Florida State, Missouri, Texas A&M, and Nebraska were all the 4 schools that he took an official visit to. So if he can get here on November 30th with his recruitment, or rather his commitment intact, you feel so much better about Florida State's chances of holding on to him than you did.
5 days out from National Signing Day when he shows up.
Right.
Yep.
And it's funny how it works, because it's a small difference, but it's ending up being pretty important. You're going from taking visits without a visit date set to Florida State to now you're taking visits and Florida State's getting a visit again. So it's a small win. But he's got to get here on the 30th.
Yeah, November 30th. I think if he gets here November 30th, if he's in the class, obviously he does. I don't think he's in the class. But right now, listen, hopefully he bought a non-refundable ticket and he can't afford not to take take the flight. But
that all being said, I still do think that the Nebraska is in a pretty good position here, despite not knocking it out of the park. I mean, they're the hometown team. They're close by. I still like where they are. Again, he's got to get here on the 30th.
Well, and I think they're also trying to sell that quarterback to him. And, that the one thing that Nebraska can do is say, hey, this is a guy that's going to be throwing you the passes. That's one thing that Florida State can't do right now, because nobody knows who the quarterback's going to be next year.
There's not much that Florida State can do right now.
Right. That's true. That's true. That is absolutely true. That's probably why they need to get him in here. But that'll be interesting to see. Now, I think that there's some other good signs. I believe that Ethan Pritchett was back on campus this weekend. He seems very positive about where Florida State sits with him. I believe Peyton Joseph was back here this weekend as well.
Byron Lewis was there.
Okay, yeah. So those are all good signs, I think, for Florida State, given where the season has gone. Is these guys are not going out and taking other unofficial visits to other places, because it would have been, listen. Byron Lewis was being recruited by Georgia. He didn't end up in Jacksonville for that game with the Gators. I think the Gators have an offer out to him. Peyton Joseph, I'm not as worried about. I don't think, I think Florida State by far is his best offer. So I think that I think he'll stick. Now, I did read where Gregory Thomas is getting a lot of attention from Notre Dame. John Garcia wrote an article a couple hours ago on that Notre Dame is working hard to flip him, as are several other schools. But, John thinks that the Seminole heritage thing has the fact that he is a Seminole Indian has a lot to do with his interest in Florida State. He takes a lot of pride in that. And he predicted today that Greg Thomas will stick with his commitment to Florida State. And obviously John's down there in South Florida and has a long-term relationship with Greg. So I think that's good news for Florida State, because it looks like right now you got Nash locked in, Lewis locked in. I cannot see Redmond going anywhere. I think he would have committed last year at this time had they offered him made him a committable offer. Feel good about Peyton Joseph. You feel good about Greg Thomas. Lofton, he's still visiting, so obviously natural to have a little bit of angst there. But if his last visit's here unofficially, that'd be great for Florida State, because I don't think he changes his mind over those 5 days. Obviously Wynn's curious as always, just because he's such a talented player. But, like you say, Ducks start to line up in a row sometimes. And if McLeod flips to Georgia, that hopefully ends Wynn's fascination with whatever he has going on with Georgia, who are right there in his backyard. Everything's been quiet with Solomon Thomas. Almost too quiet.
Yeah.
But that's who he is, right? I mean, he has not changed anything.
No,
that's who. I mean, he's been a quiet kid through his entire process, and I don't check his social media probably as often as I need to, because he's not very active on social media. But right now no news is good news with him. I think there's no rumor mill out there. He hadn't shown up in any of Gordy's reports. He hasn't shown up in any of Garcia's fact or fictions. So that's good there. And then, of course, we've already talked about Ethan Pritchard and Tramel Jones. And, I think Danielle Lewis, I think he's probably solid. I think Florida State's his best offer, which I thought he'd have more offers by now. They might get some stiff competition for him just based off the film he's put down. But, yeah, so right now I think you feel pretty good about where these 11 guys are. I would
put it this way. I would say apart from Lofton and Wynn, I feel pretty good about everybody else in the class. Yeah. I don't see Zay going anywhere. I think the opportunity for him to, as somebody who is part of the tribe, to play here at Florida State is an opportunity that he does not want to pass up.
Yep.
I'm not concerned about him. As you say, all's quiet with Solomon, which is a good thing. So I'm apart from Lofton and Wynn, I'm feeling pretty good about everybody else, which means they're all going to decommit and flip tomorrow night. Isn't that right?
That's usually how it works. Now, listen, there were some good first of all, one more 2025, two more 2025s to update. Chase Litton, the defensive end that got an offer from Florida State about a month or so ago, or at least planned an official visit. It does not look like that's coming to fruition at this time. What are you hearing on Chase?
Yeah, so from what I understand, this visit was a go. It went from not being on to being on, and then from what I understand, Florida State decided to push that official visit to a later date. Look, I don't really know what to say about this one. I mean, you try so hard to get this kid on campus. I mean, pretty much since he decommitted from Rutgers on August 17th, Florida State had been pretty adamant about trying to get him on campus. They got him on campus. They were about to get him back again on campus for an official visit, and they decided to push it down the road. And Florida State's obviously he had a preset commitment date for I think the 20th or the 23rd, something along those lines. So I don't know what their decision-making process was for this. It, without being too harsh, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you would have gotten him on a weekend where Georgia couldn't have brought him in apart from comping his ticket because he was in Jacksonville. Like, this was a prime opportunity to get a guy at a position of need on campus, and you just didn't do it for whatever reason. And there may be something else to it. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Florida State's out on this one after trying hard to get him here and get in the running for the past 2 months. So I'm kind of bewildered.
Yeah, no defensive ends in this class.
Yeah, I mean, and remember when it was a couple of weeks ago where he did a couple of stories with the national network, and Florida, there was no mention of this visit, and it's like, okay, well, maybe Florida State is feeling better about maybe getting Javion Hilson back in the fold. Obviously, since then, the possibility of Hilson coming back into this class, that door has seemingly been slammed shut. So you're lacking defensive ends. You had one on campus this weekend. There's also Tim Griffin, who has been interested in taking an official visit. I talked to him last week, and he said there was no update on setting an official visit there. His commitment date is coming up on November 23rd, and I don't know about you. I do not see him taking an official visit to Florida State on his commitment date. So that seems like another guy at the defensive end position that they were trying and putting a lot of effort into getting on campus and recruiting late in the cycle, to where they've kind of just waved the white flag. And
yeah, do you really want him in on an official visit Charleston Southern weekend where there's going to be nobody in the stands? Maybe
so he'll be in Cincinnati next week, I believe. He'll be at Cincinnati.
Open weekend would be a great weekend to bring him in. That weekend between Notre Dame and Charleston.
I suppose so, if they want to do that. But again, I'm no strategist. I don't know what their strategy is in terms of bringing in guys this late, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this. It makes no sense. You need defensive ends, and you're putting all the effort into getting these guys on campus just to wave the white flag and just not even giving yourself a chance.
Yeah, I think at this time they've probably kicked the can down the road on defensive ends out of high school because, listen, like we've talked about before, you go look at what could potentially return to this roster next year. versus what is going to return to this roster next year. Now, every kid on this roster that's got eligibility left could return. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Right.
So they're going to have to go in the portal anyway. Really, I mean, let's say Marvin Jones Jr. comes back, but Patrick Payton goes out. Leo Leahy's gone. Lo Leahy's gone. Will Turner come back? I don't know. So they're going to have to go in the portal anyway. Will Lamont Green come back? I don't know. I mean, you start going through that defensive end roster. Hester, he played
Jaden
some
Jones,
yeah.
those guys.
I mean,
yeah.
But none
a
of
lot
those
of
guys
question marks.
Yeah, none of those guys are proven players outside of Peyton and Jones. So you're probably going to have to go to the portal anyway to get a defensive end that can help you next year. I think it's what JP likes to do because they've had success with it. Obviously, having a hard time outside of Peyton developing defensive ends. Verse obviously was here for 2 years, but yeah. So I think at this point, I could see maybe 2 or 3 additions to the high school class at this date. But really, I think most of it. We just saw the junior college offer go out to wide receiver today. I think it's going to be more like that. They're going to try to find some kids that can come in here and either start or be rotational players right away. And I don't know the defensive end. Now, obviously, one of the caveats to that is you pick up a defensive end if you flip Amari Williams over to the other side of the ball and move him from tight end, which I'd be very reluctant to do after what he's done at tight end this year.
That's an interesting one because I remember talking somewhat off the record it was just after practice, so it wasn't like it was a quiet thing. Yeah. But I said to Amari, I said, hey, so kind of what's y'all's plan right now? And Amari said something to the effect of, they're gonna have me be at tight end for the first year, and then we'll see. Well, we'll see just looks less and less likely by the day, depending on how much they've been playing him at. I think he's already passed 4 games, hasn't he?
Yeah,
on the field.
I believe.
So they've burned his shirt for at least, or they haven't burned his shirt. They've overlooked the shirt for at least this year.
Yeah.
It gets real complicated if you lose Lofton too, because and Lofton probably isn't physically ready to play the tight end position the way that Mike likes to play it, but he's still going to be a guy that's in that room. So if you lose him, you're even less inclined to have Amari swap sides and play defensive end at another position in need. It's very tricky.
And I'm surprised they didn't circle back to the kid from Gainesville, Nick Clayton. I really am.
I don't think the interest was there from Clayton's side. I think Florida State passed on him, and he said, "You know what? For lack of a better term, screw you. I'm going to Wisconsin, and I'm not looking back." And that's shown in terms of he hasn't taken any visits anywhere apart from Wisconsin. You missed your shot. They should have taken the kid. I think you agree with that. Fish agrees with that. I agree with that. They should have taken the kid. Because there was no way that you were going to land Hilson, Grady, and what's the kid that's committed to Auburn? His last name's Smith, but I'm forgetting his first name.
Jared Smith.
You're not getting all of those guys. I can't even land that many 5 stars on my damn video game, much less thinking they're gonna get that guy. They'll get all those. I'm very passionate about the Nick Clayton decision.
Well,
but,
I think they're going to add a kicker to this class.
Yeah, they might.
we finally got a feel-good story. Ryan Fitzgerald, who's the FSU's place kicker, and obviously it's best offensive football player this year, is his brother Brett was on an unofficial visit this weekend. Mm-hmm. And got an offer from Florida State. Now he's a 2025 kid. I think he's got a couple of offers. I know West Georgia. I know he's been on official visits to Florida, Georgia. I'm sorry, unofficial visits to Florida, Georgia, a couple other places. I don't think he's a punter, although he's listed as a punter kicker. He's listed as either 11th or 13th best place kicker in the nation, according to Cole's kicking camp or combines. And Cole does a really good job of evaluation. So, probably see a little bit of Ryan in him, but it was a feel-good story. He was excited to get a chance to get an offer to go follow his brother, obviously, who had a tremendous kick in the game, 56-yarder continues. Listen, that kid's story has been great coming back from what he did 2 years ago. So those are some good stories. I know you talked to several 2026 prospects. I know Caden Prothero, you did an article on him, and he's a guy that has been on this campus somewhere between six and 10 times. It seems like in the 2 years we've been covering his recruitment. What did Caden have to say? And I know you talked to him a little bit about the how this season that Florida State is having could impact his long-term recruitment. And he is a puppy; he's a junior this year. So what were his thoughts?
Yeah, I think apart from Georgia and maybe Auburn, Florida State is the program that's gotten him on campus the most during his recruitment. He was here back-to-back weeks over the summer for some of those camps, some of those Mike Norvell camps. Yeah, so I think just despite the record, with him being on campus and Florida State recruiting him as long as they have, Florida State has kind of the benefit of him seeing the program at its peak and him being able to see the culture throughout kind of how the last year and a half have gone. So I think for Prothero, really it's the relationships inside the building. It's the culture that's there. But it's also the opportunity for him to showcase himself at a place like Florida State. Florida State is really banging the drum on their ability to make big physical receivers and send them to the NFL. Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, they're going to continue to bang that drum until that drum has a gigantic hole in it. And with the way that offense has looked this year, that hole might be starting to form a little bit. But yeah, so look, right now, he's obviously one of the best players in the country for the next cycle. I think Rivals has him at 33. He's a nice kid. He's a tall kid. He's very athletic. We've seen him at those camps multiple times, Pat. This is one of those recruitments rather that I think with him being in the heart of Georgia, kind of that Bible Belt probably has the edge right now, but Florida State is hanging in there in this one. And Florida State's going to be in contention for him as part of like his top schools when that starts going in. I do believe he'll be back for Florida. I think he said he'll be back for Florida, and he is planning on being back here for a junior day visit in January, he said. So it's not going to be the last time that he's on campus at Florida State.
Was Corbin Fordham on campus this past weekend?
No, he was not.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I heard his junior season has gone really, really well. Somebody was talking to me about that the other night, so I was hoping they'd get. I'm sure he'll be back on campus sometime between now. I mean, he may even be here for the Florida game. I think his brother's not. I think his brother got hurt. He's not playing the rest of this season at NC State, so that may help enhance your chances of getting him on campus. His brother was leading the league in the conference in tackles when he got hurt. By the way, so
yeah. When did he get hurt?
A couple weeks ago, I believe. I want to say that's right. I talked to my brother about several kids, legacy kids. We were just talking legacy kids at Florida State and where all they're playing, including Florida State. Listen, I'm scared to ask the question. You were at practice today. I was not. What was that like? I'm scared to say. I'm scared for you to say. Listen, everybody was good. Energy was good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like Jerry at this point. Is anybody ever pissed off over there?
Yeah. So should I even say it? I mean, the attitude of Mike was smiling. There was a couple of guys that are smiling. But I will say, in comparison to like everybody being happy and the product on the field being really, really bad, I thought today was actually probably a better practice than what we had saw last week. Is that going to mean anything? I don't know. I walked in and there was a lot of people off to the side in what you would deem the medical corner, where Jerry and Lanier Coleman work with some of the guys that are banged up. That was a very popular area of the practice field. This team's really banged up.
It's week 10. That's
everybody's got something.
Yeah, everybody's hurting. There's no doubt about that. Well, Latimer's pretty good at his job. He'll get these boys healed up, I hope, and get them ready. Whoever was over there, get them ready for this game. But listen, I was glad to hear that Justin Cryer's injury was not as bad as originally thought. He was one of your two most physical linebackers with Lundy. I know he's going to be out for Notre Dame, but hopefully he can play against Charleston Southern in Florida. We'll see. I don't know. Mike's kind of interesting with how he talks about injuries. I'll be so happy when they go to a report in the ACC similar to what they do in the SEC. And we are playing professional football and these days, and NFL has an injury report. It's got to be somewhat accurate. I wish that we would get an injury report at the college level and the ACC. But I'm going to go to practice. I think I'm going to go to practice tomorrow, check it out, see how the boys are doing. See if listen, it's going to be. They got a tough road to hoe this weekend against Notre Dame, and listen, we'll see what happens. As I said last night on our show, they melted in against Northern Illinois and lost. And Marcus Freeman was asked several times about how do you get this team up for a game against a 1-8 Florida State team that was expected to be 8-1 coming into this game, as opposed to getting them ready for an undefeated Navy team, which was their last game before their off week this past weekend. And he said, listen, you got to be ready. We found out we weren't mentally and physically prepared for Northern Illinois, and we have to remember that taste, and got to let that loss serve us well. And he was meaning it, as a reminder this week. So, and listen, he says the same thing to every coach that looks at Florida State tape does. They have talent. They have talent, and some of the best talent they see. And as I put to one of our board posters, you said that was just coach speak. I'm not sure that it is, because I said it's what they don't say after that is what I pay attention to. Because you can have talent, but do you play hard, and are you well coached? And those are things that you're not hearing these opposing coaches say. So I believe that. Listen, I've talked to several people who believe that no football. I'm not saying they got talent, deep talent, but all these coaches don't get together and throw these words together. They don't know what one's saying compared to the next. I mean, Mac Brown's not watching Marcus Freeman, and Marcus Freeman's not watching Mac Brown or Manny Diaz or Mario Cristobal. These guys don't have time to do that. So they do see something, at least physically and athletically gifted wise, from this Florida State football team. But as a collective group, certainly they have not been able to put it together. And the loss against North Carolina, which I don't think we need to get into on Tuesday after.
I've already flushed it.
I just finished Takeaway Tuesdays, and I am going to get rid of all of any angst that I have over that game and where the program is headed out of my system today. But listen, we appreciate everybody watching and listening. If you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. It'll take you to the same place. And we've got observations from today's practice. We've got Notre Dame head coach Marcus Freeman's comments on this game. Mike Norvell, if you did not read our article yesterday, talked about changes coming Florida State's way, that there was going to be a monumental step forward for this program from this year to next year. The only thing he did not tell us was how those monumental steps were going to take place. We'll learn a little bit about that sometime, probably the first day in December, or possibly the day after National Signing Day is when I think the changes will start taking effect from a staff standpoint. We also have a story on the two basketball games yesterday. Men's kicked it off with a win against Northern Kentucky, and Kurt shares his thoughts on that. Bob was at the women's basketball game yesterday morning, and I'll have Takeaway Tuesday coming out momentarily as Bob is editing all my typing mistakes right now. And so we'll have some takeaways from FSU's North Carolina game and their 1-8 start to the season. And then, of course, if you're not a subscriber to the YouTube channel, please hit subscribe before you exit out of here today, and hit the notification button so that you get notifications when we do these taped shows or live shows, and most of them have been live this year. And we will be back Thursday to talk a little bit about FSU Notre Dame, preview the Irish, tell you what we've learned about them as we begin our scouting report, and we'll have that on Thursday afternoon. We'll have the scouting report on Thursday, and then, of course, all the game day coverage. Kurt and Jerry are going to South Bend. They will have game day coverage from South Bend, and then it will be Mark, Fish, and I post-game coverage. So check back in tomorrow on the site. Check back in Thursday for Seminole Sidelines at 3 o'clock, and then post-game coverage at right around 10:30 or 11, depending on how long that game plays out. But, Nick, appreciate all the great information, man. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I may or may not hope who you voted for wins. I don't know who you voted for. I'm not going to ask you. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting night in America, people. It's going to be an interesting night in America, and see what we wake up to in the morning, because
somebody's going to wake up really disappointed tomorrow. That's for sure.
This is going to be a divided country unless we go Bush Gore and whatever the automated version of a hanging Chad is, and we have to wait a month or so to get an answer.
Oh God, I don't even know if I could. I don't know if I could get through that. I'm going to be honest. I want this thing done and dusted.
How old were you? Were you even born when that took place?
What that was 2000, right?
No. Wasn't Obama elected president in 2000?
No, Obama was 2008.
He was?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So
anyways, I was born in 1997. So probably I was 3. I was probably 3.
Yeah. So you didn't even know what a hanging Chad was.
No, I didn't care.
All right, guys. Everybody have a great day, and we will see you next time on Osceola's Seminole Sidelines.